We are back, and we would like to welcome Rube Mcmullan here today. He is a fourth-year contestant with our Oyster Shucking contest for the North Carolina Oyster Festival. Thank you for being here today. We're excited to have you.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about what you're going to do today for us.
I am going to practice and get ready for the Oyster Shucking contest, because this will be the first oysters I've actually had an opportunity to open this year. Our oyster season here in North Carolina is more of a winter sort of event where if a month has an R in it, that's when the season is open. So it's been a while since we've had an oyster. These are not North Carolina oysters, but they are excellent oysters from the Gulf, and so I'll look forward to opening them up and see if I can sneak and eat one if you guys are watching.
Rube, let me ask you this. You know, you've been in the competition several years. It's my understanding you've won a couple of years?
I either won 1 or 2 years. I can't remember. There was another year I came in second.
Tell us a little bit about that story you were sharing with us earlier.
Well, the year I came in second, Wilson Sherrill, I think, was the judge, and so I went to Wilson, who's a wonderful fellow and a good friend, and I said, Wilson, I'm going to do something nobody's ever done before. He said, what's that? He said, I'm going to file a protest. And he said, what? He said, we never had anybody file a protest. I said, well, 2 of my oysters ended up having mud in them. In other words, they didn't have an oyster, they were just mud. And so I got penalized for that, so I'm officially filing the protest here. And he said, oh, God, what are we going to do? And I said, I'm just kidding. No, and I was kidding, but the lady that was the artist for the festival that year, she took one of her beautiful posters and signed it, and then wrote on there, the second best oyster shucker I ever met.
Very cool.
So that's a treasure of mine.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
I have that framed in my house, and I'm happy with that.
Well, a couple other questions I'm going to ask you. Now, this is a competition that we have both amateurs and pros, and it's my understanding you compete in the amateur division.
Strictly in the amateur division, right.
And then the pro division, they actually go on to a national competition if they win here, because we are the official North Carolina Oyster Shucking competition.
Right.
And then if they win at the national level, which I think is in Maryland, they can go on to Ireland to an international level.
That's right.
Of shucking competition. So this is pretty serious business for coastal areas, the shucking, and it's serious business for you too, I know.
Well, it's serious business for me to eat the oysters. So, you know, my greatest area of expertise would be on the eating side of the equation. Only from probably eating so many oysters have I become somewhat of an expert at opening them. But, you know, the folks that do this for a living that compete on the professional level, you don't mess with them.
They're amazing.
They'll make you look like a fool, and so no, they're great and professional, and I love to watch them because they can flat get it done, and yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the competition. They're checking you for 3 different things we were talking about.
It's all about, well, first of all, it's about speed, and it's about presentation, which includes not just how the oyster looks, but whether it's clean. When you open an oyster, these are perfectly clean, but the oyster may have a little bit of mud on it. So when you open the oyster, if you get a little mud in the shell and that becomes part of the presentation, that's a negative. You'll be penalized for that. If you open the oyster and you split the oyster so that half of it's on one side of the shell, half of it's on the other, you get penalized for that. You know, if you cut your finger and you bleed on the oyster, that's a big penalty.
Yeah,
so,
I'd say.
And I've definitely seen that happen, and it will happen, and it can happen to anybody. It may happen to me right now.
Right.
But anyway, that's the sort of the presentation side, and then of course it's about speed.
Right.
Who can open I think they provide a dozen oysters, and who can open those the fastest with good presentation would be the winner.
That's right. Well, we've got you half a dozen here today.
Okay.
We picked up at Island Seafood in Ocean Isle Beach there on the causeway. They were gracious enough to give us a half a dozen to bring up here and let you shuck for us today and give a little presentation. And you can tell us as you go how this would happen if you were on stage. And speaking of which, this year we're actually going to have the oyster shucking up on a stage instead of under a tent, so it'd be more audience friendly.
Good, okay.
So it's going to be a lot different, and we're also going to do our oyster eating competition and stew competition up on the stage.
Excellent, excellent.
So as you start to shuck these, just tell us what you're doing, what you're looking for.
Sure. So if this were the shucking tournament, one thing they allow you to do is to substitute oysters. So what you first do is you look at your oysters, make sure that that you're happy with what you see with your oysters. For example, you want to see that the valves are set so that they're going to be easier to open. And here's an example of an oyster with a good valve right here, so you can get your knife underneath there. Versus say this one right here is one that I would put on the substitute list, because you can see here you don't have much of a valve to work with.
Right.
And what will happen quite often with an oyster like this is that little piece of shell will break when you go to open it, and then you got a problem, because then you really got to do surgery on it to get in there and get the oyster open. And if this is one of your oysters and you're spending a lot of time fighting one oyster, then clock's ticking, clock's get away from you. So this is one that I would say I would substitute if we were
for another one
having the event. In terms of opening these oysters, the way that I would open an oyster, and I don't think anybody's invented the exact way you're supposed to do it. Everybody probably has their own technique, but for me, it's just a matter of sticking the valve in there, and I just kind of stick around and pop it like that. And then if I'm in a hurry, I'm going to pop the shell real fast like that. If I'm in the tournament, in fact, if I'm really cooking in the tournament, when I pop that shell, it may go flying off in the audience, because I'm flying as fast as I can. And so then the next thing you want to do is to come in here and you cut the bottom piece off so that the oyster is floating free, and then you would set it down, and that would be your first oyster. And so when the judges come around, what they're looking for is that oyster to look perfect like this one right here looks. So you can see it looks just perfect. And what you wouldn't want to see is like
shell crumbs
in it, or mud, or blood, or I had cut the oyster improperly and half of it ended up over here.
Right.
And those would all be penalty points. So you want the oyster to be open perfectly, and just like this one is here. And then you would go to the next one, and the game continues on. And see, now that one I screwed up. See, this one I might be penalized on, because when I went to open it and I didn't cut the valve perfectly, and so I flipped it open and the oyster actually turned itself upside down. And so that would not be perfect. And then you see a little piece of shell you got to clear out. It doesn't hurt eating a bit. I mean, but just in terms of
so this thing right here, let me ask you a quick question. This is the valve, or this is the valve?
That's the muscle. That's the valve.
Okay.
All right. This is what holds the oyster on.
Right.
And the valve, of course, is what
in the back.
You usually get into them. Right. But now, actually, if an oyster is in its natural living world, it's going to be sitting on like a rock like this. Okay.
In an oyster bed.
Oyster bed, and the shell will actually open. When the tide comes in, the shell opens, and that's how the nutrients get in. And when the tide goes out, because the oyster is going to be out of the water at low tide, then the shell will close completely.
That's wild.
That's what that protects it. And then the moisture stays inside, and that's how the oyster continues to live.
Very interesting.
Yep. So, see, that one is done perfectly.
So there's 3 out of 6. I'm not timing you today, Rube.
Okay.
What is a good time?
I was trying to remember. I'm thinking that I'm going to say it's less than 5 minutes, but I honestly can't remember exactly.
And that's on a dozen.
Right. Yes, right around a dozen.
Now, the valve broke a little bit on that one. That doesn't hurt as long as it didn't get in the shell or you got it cleaned out.
Exactly right. So here's the one that I mentioned.
The hard one.
Would be one that I would have rejected. So let's just see if that shell breaks. I can see there.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was talking about. See how that breaks? And so now you can actually end up in a problem where you got an oyster, you got to get it open, but now what are you going to do? So you stick with this one.
This would be where I'd be bloody.
Well, and that's what happened last time. When you really start fighting the oyster, that knife slips, and you get your hand. And of course, now, most folks will wear a glove, and that's another whole subject, I guess. It's all different kinds of gloves that people like to use. I don't use anything sophisticated, but I've seen guys come in there with like a inner tube sort of glove.
Wow.
I'll just use like a yard glove or something like that, just to slow it down a little bit. I mean,
fend off the blood leaching.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Obviously, you don't anticipate, or you don't want to cut yourself, but it can happen. So here is this is what you might do with your presentation. Again, you're always trying to impress the judges.
Right.
So what I like to do with mine is I'll try to make a smile with a nose and 2 eyes in a
Oh,
couple of
cool.
years. You know, maybe you get an extra point for that
Yeah.
day, you know, whatever. But
Well, thank you so much for showing us how to shuck an oyster. We'd like to also mention that the Charlotte River Swamp Park will be sponsoring the oyster shucking contest, and the Ocean Isle Wing and Fish Company will also be sponsoring the oyster stew contest. We appreciate that. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it. And do we get to eat now? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Thank you.